Hey, everybody, and welcome to Notes from the Other Side. This is a podcast for people who love Jesus, but have some real concerns about Christianity. Here at Notes, we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people, using a progressive theological lens and a socio-historical approach to studying the Bible. So if that sounds like your jam, come on in and have a seat. But buckle up, it might get bumpy. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the, I almost said to the Burrows at Berea because we were talking about it. Okay. All right, everybody, welcome back to Notes from the Other Side. This is a podcast where we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people. I'm your host, Tiziana, Mom, So Hard, So Verse, and I've got some really exciting folks with me once again in the studio. Welcome back, my friend Heather.
Hello. Oh, Heather.
Yes.
Can you just swing that in a little bit? Just a little far.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
put your
posture.
thing down to your little pop filter.
Yeah, the pop filter's giving
Push it
you an
down.
illusion of the whole thing
There
being
you
closer
go.
to your
There
face
you
than
go.
it is. Yeah.
Ta-da!
Yeah.
Yay.
Technical difficulties. Behind the glass, Rocket Man, Andy Bishop.
I'm going to clip that. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I got to clip that and set it aside.
And put some music behind it. Some do, right behind it. Yeah. And
Dude, you could use that as Foley, for whenever, instead of the piano.
whenever we're
Tiziana
blocking
can't
out
stop
an
the
F
F
word.
word.
Yeah.
So let's just technical difficulties. Sorry, that was
Instead of the
Tiziana
piano
going
sound,
off.
that was my F words. And then, as always, my wonderful co-host, Rick the Podfather Welch.
Oh, man. It's so nice to be here.
I'm
And I
so
want
glad
you to
you're
know, I've got to have Andy edit our part 5 of our Daniel series.
Uh-huh.
And you were involved in it. I think there's over 379 F-bombs in it.
No, get out. I didn't put that many in there.
You were...
I
Did
don't
I?
know. No, I have no idea.
Get ready.
I've said this before. I don't hear swears.
Yeah. They're just words
There's
that
a-
come in and out.
Right? So
Easily
you could say it like
over
1,000
50.
times.
No.
Over 50.
There is no way.
100%. If I'm lying, I'm dying.
Let's count them. I want to count them.
We just tell you
It's
how many
literally going to
pianos
be
I
a
put in.
piano fest.
Yeah.
No.
Boom, boom,
On
boom.
Daniel chapter 5, I said that many F-bombs
We did
on the
5 and
Burrows
6.
podcast.
I wonder if there's enough
Oh,
for
Not
between
only
me
did
to
you
five
do
and
it, but you
6.
did it when you were reading the Bible.
Oh, come
It was
on.
so awesome.
I
Dude,
can't
That
wait.
is not
Okay.
entirely uncommon. Okay,
how are you momming so hard? I'm cussing everybody today.
how am I momming so hard? I'm done with my antibiotics.
Hey.
So I'm momming so hard, unmedicated. That's how hard I'm momming today.
There you go.
I'm momming, I'm raw dogging it.
I don't think that's
Raw
what it
dog in
means.
life.
Totally sober. That's how I'm momming so hard today.
Listen, I don't think the word means what you think it means.
No, I know. Yeah.
A raw dog in life, though, in reference to
Yeah. The stuff
antidepressants.
means
Gotcha.
no friction or no
Yikes.
no support. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's reel this baby in.
Let's reel this baby in. What were you saying though about this? Okay, everybody else that doesn't know what we're talking about. I'm also a co-host on Rick's podcast, The Burrows of Berea, and we're doing a deep dive on Daniel. It's fascinating. Go ahead and go listen to it. And apparently I delivered a number of F-bombs whilst mid-text. And I'm being alerted to this fact just now because like Andy, when I'm in it, I don't know what I'm saying. Like when
Right.
I'm in it. And oftentimes when I'm reading the text, I will stop and be like, because you know what? God was like,
Yeah, that's
F that.
true.
Or I
Yeah.
do stop a lot when
Yeah. You
I
editorialize.
I creatively interpret scripture.
Listen,
I'm already going to hell,
I
apparently.
was raised
so
in
it's
a
fine.
family where the F word was just part of the vernacular.
It's just part of the vernacular.
It's not that he was a sailor. It's just the way my dad talks. And so it goes.
I grew up near French Canadians. You got nothing on
You got, yeah.
You got nothing.
So, but the fact is that, and that's one of the things I've always wanted to tell a lot of my Christian friends, and especially our listeners, is that a lot of times we don't hear it because we're just so used to it. And it's not that, we're
Yeah.
not part of the purity culture, but we're trying to we got some 12 and 13 and 14-year-old kids that love our
Yeah.
show. So please put that technical difficulties in there if you don't mind.
And I'm just trying to be like cognizant of the fact that there might be people listening to this show that also have some sensitivities. So I try to get Andy to edit out the F-bombs when I drop them on this show as well, even though, again, in my personal life, my dad actually was a sailor.
There you go.
My dad is literally ex-Navy. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And has like a pair of lips tattooed on his butt
no judgment.
that say
I'm
to
not
sir with
judging
love
you.
around them, like a circle. That's my dad's tattoo.
Oh, wow.
That he got when he got out of the Navy.
Yeah, there's no judgment here.
Yeah,
you know, I love you so much.
totally.
No judgment at all.
But I know, and I'm
if
actually
Heather
now
says
I'm
an
looking
F-bomb,
forward.
I literally would throw something at her.
Great.
I can only handle one, not
I'll
two.
do my best.
I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, this episode, what we're going to do today is we're just going to do a little bit of a wrap-up discussion on some of the stuff that we've touched on in the last two episodes. What we've been discussing here on Notes from the Other Side is cults in America and sort of the ways that cultural Christianity and some of our more well-known high-control religions inadvertently create cult-like conditions that produce in those of us that are kind of unfortunate enough to get swept up in it, some of the same emotional and psychological damages that standard cult practices produce in their followers.
Mm-hmm.
This has been well documented. One of the things I was discussing last time, and maybe not, but religious trauma is now kind of included in the DSM-5, and it's a specialized wing of therapy now, because people that are growing up inside some of these very high control religions and high profile ministries are leaving these ministries with a lot of emotional and spiritual trauma. Myself, I know for me, when I left high control Christianity, I literally had an ulcer at 19 years old. Because I was fasting and praying constantly, which is really unhealthy and not super good for a growing body. I was participating in these like very intense prayer meetings. I was a worship leader for the church that I was a part of. I also took my phone off of Do Not Disturb so I could mom so hard and forgot to put it back on, excuse me, while I tell my babysitter how to turn on the sound machine.
There you go.
Technical difficulties.
Is it the Miami sound machine?
I hope so.
Gloria Estefan. Come on, baby, to do that tongue.
Although in reality, I'm glad that I had my phone on Do Not Disturb and forgot to turn it back on, because otherwise my 2-year-old would not be taking a nap today, which would result in me momming so hard without drugs all day and all night. And nobody is going to win in that scenario.
Not a chance.
So anyway, back to our standard topic. Graduated with an ulcer because I was doing all this stuff and I felt all this enormous amount of pressure, and and again, and we just listened to in our previous episode, Heather is back with us again today. She shared with us her personal experience within high control Christianity and within a ministry that had a sort of high level of expectation regarding your community behavior. And so to kick this episode off, I've gotten several books that I will be reading over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll probably do one more final episode on this particular topic. But there's a man whose name is Stephen Hasson, and he is an American mental health professional and author. I've got 3 of his books. He specializes in the area of cults, and he's worked as a deprogrammer since the 1970s and has been an advocate for a non-coercive form of exit counseling that he has sort of pioneered. He's written several books on mind control, and his personal story is that he was raised Jewish but was kind of recruited into Unification Church, where he spent 27 months as a member. And this is all straight from his Wikipedia. But, some of the hallmarks of his experience there were, living in communal housing, sleeping for less than 4 hours a night, being involved in fasting and prayer to prove loyalty, these sorts of things. He had to surrender his bank account to the church. And he ended up quitting college so that he continued working for the organization. And he said that he was ready to kill or die for Sun Myung Moon, which was the leader of his church. And his membership of the church, of course, concerned and confused his family. And then one day, after 2 full nights of not sleeping, being kind of up and in prayer, he was in a car accident. And that is when his parents hired a deprogrammer to kind of capture him from the hospital, take him to an apartment, and get it figured out.
Let's talk about how your brain works when you don't sleep.
You know what? So, right.
Sleep deprivation is a big part of cult life.
It's so bad.
Well, and so when he woke up from all of that and sort of, he had such enormous amount of guilt for recruitment for others that he sort of has then devoted his life to figuring this all out and helping others escape this particular church. In terms of his education and his credentials, he's written a ton of books. I'm not exactly sure where he went to college exactly. It looks like, oh yeah, he completed a master's degree at Cambridge College and studied hypnosis. Anyway, he's this really fantastic person, but he developed what's called the BITE model of authoritarian control. Because a lot of times we think about, these high control religions and these high control situations from the outsider's perspective, it seems very obvious. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like in the research that Rick's doing over on the Burroughs of Berea Patreon page. I plug that shit.
You plug
every
it so
time.
hard, and I need to plug notes from the other side.
No, it's okay. That's right. I have 12 subscribers. It's fine. But if one of them gives you the $3 a month to listen to your special side series, I will have won some sort of award in my own mind. But when you look at these, what we would notice as a cult, for example, I just read about Stephen's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Us reading from the outside, we're like, obviously, right? But I went to a very standard Assemblies of God church. You wouldn't necessarily have looked at me and said, obviously. But when you read about what this man defines as authoritarian, the model he uses to define an authoritarian control model, for those of us that grew up in high control, high profile Christianity that had high control ministries, let's just listen to what exactly the BITE model breaks down as. The B stands for behavior. Behavioral control, which is to regulate an individual's physical reality, dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates, when, how, or with whom the member has sex, control types of clothing and hair, regulate your diet, including fasting and or what you can and can't drink, manipulation of or deprivation of sleep. Now, this also goes down to the more extreme forms of like punishment for disobedience by torture and separation from families and imprisonment. But me personally, behavioral control, my upbringing in church absolutely included every single one of those things I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I was who I did and didn't have sex with and when, totally controlled. What I could or couldn't wear, absolutely 100% controlled. Whether or not I did or did not eat, fasting was encouraged, and it was dictated at certain times in the year in the biblical festival calendar. And again, you weren't required to participate, but if you didn't, there was an enormous amount of social pressure due to shunning and whether or not you were considered an acceptable part of the congregation if you did or didn't enact these particular things. So there's the B for the BITE model. The I, information control. So deception, deliberately withholding information, distorting information to make it more acceptable, systematically lying to the members, minimizing or discouraging access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, and media, critical information, former members, keep members busy so they don't have time to think and investigate. Control through cell phone and texting calls and internet tracking. Compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines.
Mm-hmm.
Encourage spying on other members. Absolutely. I don't know how many prayer circles turn into a gossip chain for y'all, but Heather's laughing. You are absolutely encouraged because if I'm not my brother's keeper, then what am I doing with my life? And that was another big part of the Last Days ministry. Whenever they would have like a concert and not as many souls would sign up, not as many YWAM dollars were being funneled back into that ministry, it fell back on the members to start accusing one another. What were you doing to inhibit the what sin were you harboring that the Spirit didn't
how did you quench the Spirit? Why are you quenching the Spirit? Yeah.
The BITE model, that's B, behavior, I, information, T, thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth.
Yeah.
Adopting the group's map of reality as reality. Instill black and white thinking. Decide between good versus evil. This man is not... He's talking about standard cult practice. But if this does not describe my experience growing up in fundamentalist Christianity, I don't know what does. I read this and had like a real breakthrough moment in my personal spiritual healing journey.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Did it make your body shake?
It made me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, because whenever I first got into this and I was reading it, because I was deeply fundamental as well.
Yeah.
Like I had it's almost like this weird anxiety, like it's almost like a panic attack.
Yeah.
Suddenly you realize it's like, oh, wait, like I was a part of this group. What?
I was a part of this. Okay, yeah, because we're going to get somewhere.
Straight up sounds like a formula for brainwashing.
Oh,
it does.
absolutely.
Yeah. Like the CIA wrote it. Like that's how it reads.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
The group, so back to thought control, requires members to internalize the group's doctrine, decides between good versus evil, and it organizes people into an us versus them grouping.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So now and then again, this is why I like referring to the Christianity, especially when it comes to Christian nationalism, as high control versus a cult. Because again, as you go down, as you descend into a cult, the control becomes more extensive. But the ways that modern Christianity sets us up to accept these realities already as real, that the world is divided between black and white thinking, that the world is divided between us versus them, that the world is divided between what the church tells me to think and what the world thinks, that sets us up to be sucked into these many cults.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the T model. And then there's the E, emotional control. Number 1, manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are determined as evil, wrong, or selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Teach emotion-stopping techniques to block feelings of homesickness, anger, or doubt. Doubt.
Yeah.
You just need to have more faith. Why do you lack faith?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you that you just don't have enough faith?
Mm-hmm.
Promote feelings of unworthiness, such as identity guilt. You're not living up to your potential. Your family is deficient. Your past is suspect. Your affiliations are unwise. Your thoughts, feelings, actions are irrelevant or selfish. Social guilt and historical guilt. And then back to emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of thinking independently, the outside world, enemies, losing salvation, leaving or being shunned by the group, and the fear of others' disapprovals. Number 6, extremes of emotional highs and lows. Love bombing and praise one moment and then declaring you a horrible sinner the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen, the bite model that Stephen Hassan has come up with in order to explain how this control works. I had a recording contract with a private Christian label when I was 19. I spent the first summer out of high school writing that album, okay? And when I moved to Hendersonville, North Carolina, I got sucked up into a small cult group that was definitely the more abusive form of all of these things. But my membership of a high-profile Christian church in megachurch had set me up because it had already set me up with all of that stuff. So it was easy. Those folks convinced me that that wasn't God's plan, quote unquote, for me to go out to California. And I have lived the majority, I believe, of my life since that time with some feeling of guilt that I missed my life's calling, that I missed my life's purpose. I have felt this enormous sense of failure, that there was something important and special, that I was anointed, and that I squandered it somehow. And when I read this, I realized that that's because the church set me up to believe that about myself. And in a really massive, I was able to just let that go. I didn't fail God by not making the shit that I was going to sing on that album. I have this, the other day I was driving down the road and I was singing the number one that was going to be my number one hit, right? I would be humiliated if this Tiziana sitting here in this studio right now, if that had been the hallmark of the beginning of my career as a musician, if somehow I would have gotten a Dove Award for that album, if that, I would have to be spending all of my life apologizing for, correcting, and taking it back. I think Jesus saved me in reality from making that shitty album because I can sing my ass off. It would have been popular, but it's garbage. Mm-hmm. It's straight up misogynistic trash garbage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Garbage.
Now I want to know.
I know.
Andy. Oh.
Would love to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really after you were talking about the bite model, it became pretty obvious that I think that you and I and Heather and so many other people that we know were raised in high control groups, Christian control groups, And so is there an actual Christian model that doesn't follow the bite model? Is there one?
Well, so here's the deal. are you a part there? Because there is an antithesis, I suppose, to that.
Mm-hmm.
And do you go to a congregation, or are you a part of a group that promotes the alternate voices?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a part of an organization or a group that says, this is what we believe, this is how we enact our belief system, but we understand that other people believe differently?
Right. Various interpretations. Can you handle it if you're in this group? I love those kinds of groups that are willing to do that, which is why, I had a podcast in the first place. But church settings are a little different, though.
A church setting where sometimes you ask a question and a person of authority and meaningful authority is willing and comfortable saying, I don't actually, that's kind of complicated. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. If you ever hear that, I don't know that alone is, a perfect indicator, but it's not a bad sign.
It's nice to hear, though. It's nice to hear.
Yeah, it's not a bad sign when somebody admits, because every human, we're all just kind of guessing and leaning and, logicking our way through this BS.
Well, I think that because we are all so familiar with church being, we are the guarders of the truth. Mm-hmm. We are every church I've ever been a part of, ever.
Yeah.
We are the guardians of the truth of God, and it is our responsibility to disseminate it. Mm-hmm. But when your entire spiritual practice is predicated on we are the guardians of truth, then it means nobody else has any truth, period.
Right.
And so is there a Christianity that says, okay, we have a channel that's open to us and we are doing our best to be a conduit for goodness and for God, but we don't have the market cornered on God? That is where you start to have the problem. Mm-hmm. Because mainstream Christianity states the world was dying from sin. Jesus Christ came to save people from sin. And that if you don't accept Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, you can't go to heaven and you can't connect to God. Mm-hmm. But we already on this show have discussed we don't believe there is such a physical thing as heaven and hell. We don't believe that was what Jesus's message was.
Not a physical.
Right.
It's
not
a
like
spiritual reality.
Spiritual reality.
I think.
Where you go to forever to burn and,
I don't believe in an eternal conscious torment.
Yeah.
And I believe that I've proven it.
Right.
I went through painstaking
sure.
efforts proving it.
But see, I think
biblically,
that's where it starts to, that's, I think, the end of that's where universalism, I think, comes into play. Mm-hmm. And of course, universalism being the eschatological belief, theological idea that when Jesus died on the cross, it was for all people, because God willed that none should perish, but that all have the gift of eternal life. That somehow or another, when Jesus died on the cross, it put a complete and utter end to any sacrificial system, period. Mm-hmm. And that all humanity now is, redeemed. Period.
Yeah, and our friend Rick Carter holds to that.
Yeah.
Like pretty hardcore, know, and he sees that as the only outcome.
Yeah. And that your only options now are, do you choose to live your current life as if you are living in heaven and you're part of the kingdom of God on earth, or are you living outside the kingdom of God on earth, just kind of engaged in gross, personal, selfish, icky, icky, sticky bubblegum, as, Miss Rachel would say. You know what I mean? like yes. Those are your options. But I think that is kind of like at the crux of the issue is do Christians have the market cornered on God?
Look, here's one thing. I want to say yes. Mm-hmm. Not just because I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
But because when you got married, did you guys read like 1 Corinthians 13?
Hell no.
Why not?
No, because everybody does.
Okay, so listen.
And because that's not what Paul's talking about.
Thank you. He's not.
He's not talking about that.
He's talking about a better way. In 1 Corinthians 12, he's talking about spiritual gifts and the way that these things are being done in the first century church, like what they're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
But he says, I'm going to show you a better way.
Yeah.
And then he explains it. Love is patient, love is kind, love is,
Yeah.
it does not seek its own. It does
Right.
it doesn't puff up. Like
Yeah.
he goes through this giant list.
Right.
We love to read at weddings and nobody follows it.
Yeah.
But he's saying at the end, it's faith, hope, and love remain, but these
The
three
greatest
remain,
of
but
these
the
love.
greatest is love.
Yeah.
Tell me something.
Mm-hmm.
Show me these other religions in the world that have their what they would call their God, where that is the central focus of the message, to where you lay down your life completely. We haven't seen it in Christianity.
Yeah.
In our world, we have not seen these words in action.
No.
We haven't. And so I'm asking the question, what if this is the fruit of the Spirit that we're supposed to bear, love and peace and patience and kindness? You can sing it if you'd like.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah.
my only point is
Yeah.
the central doctrine is love, period. If you miss that and you don't engage that, then you haven't truly engaged Christianity. I'm sorry. I believe
Yeah.
what Jesus taught in regard to that
Yeah.
and how Paul learned it, that's a testament all to itself. How Paul, of all people, learned this. All of these men
Yeah.
were willing to lay their lives down because of it. They just were. And so I think that, to me, the easiest way to overlook and use bite or to look at churches or cults or whatever is if there's a lack of love in that place, true love that's defined,
Mm-hmm.
boy, you can point it out immediately. It's immediate. There's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. And
So I have a problem with every church.
yes, you have a problem with every church. Well, I'm not an expert in world religions.
Oh, I'm not an expert even in my own religion, but I mean,
yeah.
it just, you know what I'm saying?
But I think that, like, for example, a lot of indigenous knowledge and a lot of indigenous spiritual practices do include at the foundation and base a deep love of one another and of community and a way of caring for one another in community that I would argue encapsulates that concept of we must love.
Yeah, but again, this is the issue. Go ahead, Heather. Were you going to say something?
I would agree. I think there's a lot of faiths that are really centered around love for your common man, right?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, because most of them are about group unity. It's just about how you
I think it's
desire
the
to bring about
practice.
that unity.
Right. There's
Yeah.
just, for me, there's like, okay, I'm going to give you just a very easy classic example.
Mm-hmm.
The church that I grew up in, if you were a person that was at a bar the night before and you weren't a part of that church and you came in, there was an immense amount of love for that person. They wanted that person to be able to see the truth and have hope and all these things. And they would pray for him. And if that person got saved, that was an amazing thing. Like, well, yay, they got
Yeah.
saved. This is good. We want them to have that. But the problem is, it's almost like it's a burden. The minute you become saved, then the next thing comes up. Now we got to talk about baptism. Oh, but does baptism matter? Well, or does it not matter? Or whatever, where does it, do I have to do it? Do I not have to do it? Whatever. Then they make the decision, they do it, they become a member. Everything becomes like this yoke.
Yeah.
This impossible yoke. And then after that, then you got to join the game. Now you got to be a part of what we're doing.
Right. Now you
And
got to
then
get plugged
judged-
in to make sure.
Plugged
yeah.
in. That's
That's
perfect.
the perfect word. That's how they always say it. You got to get plugged in to make sure that we can continue to
and
foster a
then
sense
you
of control.
lose
Yeah, I know.
that initial
Yeah.
thing that you wanted to invite them into. And you know what? That's what we all do it. I don't know why, but we get involved in that, and then it's a yoke of bondage. It's ridiculous.
It's the structure of church, period.
Yes.
It's the structure of a Christian church model, period,
Mhm.
that in itself almost robs the individual of the actual authentic church experience. And part of it is money, because churches need large congregations in order to pay the bills. You can't, you got to meet in a building. You have to pay a pastor. The pastor doesn't, my pastor does an enormous amount of work, so she has to get paid because that's the environment that we currently live in now. You have to have money to pay taxes,
to live.
to have retirement and healthcare, right? So because there has to be a certain amount of money, people that are involved in these congregations, what am I paying for?
Yeah.
Have you ever gone to a gym? Our gym done effed up. Okay, just saved Andy from having to use a piano stand. They hired a bad pool person. So part of our gym membership should include 365-day a year access to an indoor pool system. We are still paying our tithes and offerings every month in the form of membership fees for this
Yes.
place.
Mhm.
We have not been able to use our pool for like almost 8 months.
Yeah, and they should,
because
there's a percentage that should come off, period.
right. So but I think the same attitude comes to church.
Mhm.
If I'm paying X amount of money every month, where's my Sunday book group? Where's my kids' childcare? Where's my, where's my Sunday pop-up drinks on Easter for us to hang out after?
Yeah.
I think churches as an organization feel a certain amount of pressure to provide these kinds of services so that they can justify their existence.
Yeah.
And then, but also it's our fault because we want those things.
Listen, man, you're the one that decided to be a tax-free organization, a nonprofit. Suck it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I always said if I ever did it, I'm going to be taxed. I'm going to treat it as if it's a business, and I'm going to keep it honest. And if you say when you bring in your money, I'm going to say you're not doing anything but just keeping a building going.
Yeah. Well, although at the same time, so, and that's a whole other
Kinda like
conversation.
taxes.
Yeah.
Do what?
Kind of like taxes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And I think like I would, by the way, guys, I get a lot of slack for this. I do. But
No.
I seriously,
No,
I
I
do,
don't know what you're
man.
about to say, but I'm being an asshole. You get slack for a lot
Better
of
to be
things
an
you
asshole
say.
than a
I
whole
think-
ass. That's what my wife says.
I'm sorry. I think you both mean flack.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of flack. Mainly because I think that
Getting a lot of ass is a very, very different conversation.
these faith-based organizations are so loose. It's so the terms are so loose. They're
Yeah.
so loose. And it allows these people like you were talking about where a pastor is in total control and
Yeah.
can do whatever they want. And there's so
Yeah.
much. Dude, let's just keep it real. Just keep it real. Let's tax it. Oh, what? People say that. What? Sorry. It's a business, man. It is a stinking business.
I think in some regards it really is. Maybe it should be harder to get 501(c) status or something.
Well, yeah,
You
I
know?
think so.
Yeah, like unless you can like prove that your organization is donating or using X amount of your dollars for
Those
like
are-
community betterments or something.
Those are called write-offs.
Yes.
Well, I guess write-offs.
write-offs.
You could just make
Absolutely.
them a write-off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
as long as it's in the tax system. As long as it remains in the tax system,
I
yes,
really-
it would be.
I want to argue with you, but I don't think I can.
You can if you'd like.
No.
And you might even win.
And you'd be wrong.
No, but you might even win.
But I
just-
hear what you're saying. It's
I want
like,
it to be honest. I think everybody needs to be on the up and up about this.
yeah, if your business, if your nonprofit can afford private jets, you can pay your friggin' taxes.
Come on, bro. Sorry.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I
You
hear
got
what
a
you're saying.
$12 million
and that
home?
might be part of what.
Really?
Yep. Yeah.
The trick
Yeah.
is
How does
those
Joel
jets-
Osteen have that?
the
Yeah.
trick is those jets could probably be written off. That's the
If
trick.
they just made it, if they just turned it into a profit business.
if they could show
Yeah.
they actually needed it for use, which they
Dude,
might with somebody that travels.
Turn it
enough.
into a private business and then don't even report it to anybody except the U.S. IRS.
Oh yeah.
The end.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you or anybody else. If you want to run, a regime like that, you don't have to lie, you don't have to hide, you don't have to connive.
yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
But
yeah.
freaking Joel Osteen, dude, has a $12 million home. He's got these. I'm sorry. I can't stand it. I hate that stuff.
But you're right.
Yeah, prosperity gospel stuff is
Ugh,
really gross.
brutal.
Yeah, TBN and all that stuff. Like, and that's the thing. But that's the thing. At the foundation of all of it are people sitting at home wanting to believe that they're a part of something,
Yes.
wanting to believe that they belong
Mm-hmm.
to something, which is why even all of your cults that you're talking about over on the Burrows of Berea Patreon page,
Give this lady
Right?
a hundo. Give her
every
a hundo.
time, all of those cults that you're talking about, the Branch Davidians, the Jonestown people, all of them,
They all started out good.
they all started out as people who were just trying to create authentic community
And they're trying to get back to the first century.
and trying to
they were
get back
trying to be good.
this kind of quote unquote first century Christianity, which Heather and I were talking about is common of even these ministries that her and I got wrapped up in, because it all came out of that like West Coast 1970s grassroots movement, because that's where all of this came out of. Heather, take it away.
I take it away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about that. What were you talking about?
Heather,
might
are you
know
a Jesus
better.
freak?
I am not.
No, but that's where that came from. Yeah.
Sir, I am not old enough to be a Jesus freak.
Are you a child of a Jesus freak?
Yeah.
You mentioned it in Charlotte area. I'm assuming that it was possibly an offshoot of the Vineyard.
So my parents were raised rural and then moved to Charlotte
Okay.
as like young married couple
Right.
because my dad worked for the power company.
Yeah.
And they both grew up in like Methodist church.
Right.
very rural Methodist church, very, very traditional. But yeah, I think their church was not a vineyard church, but like in the vein.
Yeah, I mean,
You
it
know?
was very popular in the 70s and early 80s. I mean, that's what happened.
It's super
Yeah.
common.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just this whole movement.
You can watch Jesus Revolution if you want to learn more about it.
There's a ton of movies, and I think there's a ton of groups that came out of California at the same time
Yeah, it
that
feels
kind
like-
of,
yeah.
we were talking about, kind of like splintered around the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
because-
was Calvary Chapel really is what
Yeah.
started it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
you know,
Calvary
Chuck
Chapel.
Smith. Chuck Smith and that group, and then it was Lonnie Frisbee that came in, and then this hippie movement grew and grew and grew, and then there was a little bit of fallout because Lonnie Frisbee was a homosexual, and then even though he was married, and then he left, and then he went to Florida, and then things from Florida went up the East Coast, which is where I think that's how it got to Charlotte. It worked its way up from Florida, and so yeah, I mean, it was just it was a culture, and it was actually good. And you know what? There was a lot of people. There was a lot of good that came out of that. There was a lot of good.
This is the unfortunate reality of the spread of, these kind of high control Christians, is that there's a lot of good that can come out of
Yes.
the part of the bite model that we just talked about is this black or white thinking. And I think part of the challenge that we have as individuals, recovering from being a part of these, but also the way that we navigate moving forward is actually and this is erasing this black or white thinking. And I think that's something that Christianity really needs to take a good hard look at itself and start doing.
Yeah.
We've got to start recognizing every last one of us is gray. We all live in this in-between place. None of us have the actual answers. None of us, not a single one of us, I don't give a fuck. There's a good F-bomb for you. I don't give a fuck. None of us knows what happens to each other when we die.
That was
Nobody
quality.
knows.
I really like it when you get the good
Get the-
percussive
oh,
K.
I know.
Very nice
Seriously.
enunciation.
Not only that,
Absolutely.
she rolled her lip into the F.
I did.
It was amazing.
I
It was like,
really did.
"Ugh,
That's how strongly
ugh."
I feel about it. Nobody knows what happens when you die. Nobody. And so to sit there and say that you personally, you as an individual standing in front of me, have the knowledge of where somebody else is going to go, what's going to happen to somebody else after they die,
Yeah.
is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me. And so I think that erasing that like very black and white thinking, that is the first step of Christians in general towards moving away from these high control versions of Christianity into a healthier, more comprehensive version of it. Because the entire point of Christianity was, how are we going to live? And it's turned into, what's going to happen when I die? That the entire point of the message of Jesus Christ was, how are we going to live? And it's turned into, what's going to happen when I die? We have got to, as Christians, we've got to let go of that and stop making heaven and hell the first page on the brochure. It's not the point.
Yeah, what does he say? He says, I came to give life, and that
more abundantly. My yoke
right?
is easy. My burden is light.
So how do you guys think this happened?
How do I think what happened?
That we moved to like,
We did it immediately.
no.
life and death. I think first century 100%
Immediately.
was centered
I
around
think
like
it's
we're going to die.
Well,
vestiges of the religion it comes from.
I
Right.
actually have a slightly different belief. I believe that this whole thing really got out of control during the First Crusades with the creation of indulgences. I think that's really where this whole thing. Is it Pliny the Young? Who was the first person? Hold on, let me just get my internet out.
Get your internets. And then I'm going to start throwing down on the Great Schism of 1054. I
Right.
can't wait.
So Pope Urban, that's right, Urban II in 1095. So I believe Heather's correct. This concept of what's going to happen when you die is like a huge part, because otherwise you wouldn't have had so many first century martyrs, right? That were just like absolutely thrilled beyond measure to be torn to pieces by lions in a friggin' arena, right?
I don't know that they were thrilled about it. I think that they just acknowledged that this was
all
part
of
of
the
it.
writings that come from it. If you've ever read anything like, what is
Like
the Grace of
Polycarp?
Sophia? No. Like if you've read any of these first person accounts, supposedly some of the apocryphal works that float around of these periods of time.
Okay.
What is her name? The something of Persephone, the passion of Persephone, whatever.
Yeah.
Like these women that like just had a baby and her dad's like in the jail begging her to denounce Christ. And she's like, no, it is for my son that I gladly accept this thing that's happened to me. Like, so many people were just like absolutely like could not wait You know what I mean? To just like, fight. Now, that's how the stories were told.
Yeah.
That's the story that was passed down. I don't know if those are also just a form of like mind control, right?
I'm sure.
And propaganda.
If you're dealing with a people that are being incredibly oppressed, the best thing that you can do for them is make them unafraid to die.
Yeah.
Right. The best possible thing you can do for them. And so I think Heather's right. But I think that whenever the church got involved, Pope Urban II, in the sale of indulgences in order to encourage Christians to fight in the First Crusade, which of course was the spread of Islam had to be stopped, right, in 1095. I think that what happened there is the church realized how powerful a motivator that could be, and it became the central focus, I think, until the Protestant Reformation, when Martin Luther was the first person to be like, no, you're saved by faith, right? You're saved by grace.
Sola fide.
Sola fide, right?
Yep.
Because because up until that moment, the church had this absolutely enormous amount of control over people's lives. But I think that that belief system, that heaven and hell nonsense, and it's nonsense. I'm going to say that out loud because this is the thorny topic, and that's what we do here.
It's your show, and you can do what you want.
It's my show, and I can do what I want. That nonsense concept of heaven and hell as your eternal reward, because first of all, it removes any responsibility or culpability for this life. You can just treat the earth and each other as trash as you want to some degree because your rewards are in heaven, you know, as if this life personally here doesn't matter even one whit. And you're not technically responable for it at all.
Which is so bizarre because even the Bible itself says there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. And they always forget the new earth part.
Yeah.
But
we haven't got there yet. See, because 90% of Christians are still waiting for the new earth because it's going to come drop down. Kirk Cameron's going to bring it. Kirk Cameron and Jesus Christ.
Kirk Cameron's coming on my show next month.
That's right.
Is he?
Yes, he is.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Is it got via Zoom?
Yeah, has to be.
Oh man,
he's filming a new like Mr. Rogers-esque type Christian show called Mr. Iggy and Kirk.
But he's also, I believe, if I'm not wrong here, he's renounced the eschatology of the Left Behind series.
Yes, he has.
Interesting.
He's part of my eschatological
Listeners,
view.
Please be sure to check out the Burrows of Berea podcast.
and
the
Notes from the Other
Patreon.
Side.
Yeah.
Notes from the Other Side.
Already on Notes from the Other Side. But I think that is the bottom line. I think that that's really the bottom line. The first step towards healing, if you are coming out of one of these high control religions or one of these high control denominations, which let's be frank is 2/3 of American Christianity.
Yeah.
The first step is telling yourself you don't actually have the market cornered on truth or on God. It's potentially more complicated than you might be willing to admit.
Mm-hmm.
And that the heaven and hell argument is pinning people against a wall in a way that's not actually conducive to life and life more abundantly.
But it is such a powerful thing. Yeah, if you loved your grandfather and your grandfather was so wonderful to you, and then you lose your grandfather and your hope is that you'll get to see him one day, dude, that is a powerful motivator to do what other people want you to do.
Yeah.
To stay in line, to be able to, I want to do what grandpa did so I can get back to grandpa. Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful thing. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And, but in the times of the indulgences, it got out of hand. Because right now we're saying, I'd love to see my grandpa again. Back then they were like, oh, if you
can get him out of you can
get him out of purgatory and get him on into heaven so you can see him.
But that's one of the reasons why I think the current conversation around heaven and hell, that's where I think it started. That's where I think it matters, because that's exactly what those high control religions teach people like Heather and I.
Of course.
Other people going to heaven and hell is my fault.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility. You are the only Jesus some people will ever see.
You're the hands and feet.
And if you aren't although at the same time, at church on Sunday, the woman who was visiting pastor, who's affiliated with our congregation and leads she does a welcome meal at a church like every Monday night. Majority of the attendants are unhoused men. And she was telling the story about how she was handing out like hand warmers and just checking on people, saying what their needs are. And she said that one of the larger, tattooed from head to foot gentleman, big rough looking guy looked at her and said, "You're the only mama most of us ever had." And it just she said, it took everything in her power to not just whatever. You're the only mom. He said, you're the only mama most of us got, and then she said in that moment, We are God's only hands. We are God's hands, right? But when I was a child, instead of being a gift, that was given as a threat.
Yes.
It was used against me as a form of control because, like Heather, I always wanted to be a missionary as a child. I have a natural bent towards compassion. I have a natural bent towards caring for other people. I have a natural bent. My father my mom is a nurse practitioner who works on the Navajo Nation, as part of a government contract to work for underserved populations. And my father's a substance abuse counselor. Mm-hmm. I come by it honest. I just want to help. But when when an organization takes that natural desire, I don't care what the name of your organization is, even if it's First Assemblies of God. If the name of your organization is, Bethel Community Church. If your organization is taking that natural desire and using it as a threat to control your behavior and make you feel personally responsible for whether or not people go to hell, it's your fault. I don't believe that's healthy.
They'll say
I don't
things
believe
like,
that's healthy.
you don't want to ruin your witness.
Wow, that's a lot of power.
Yes, it is. Do you remember when Ralph said,
which Andy's correct, because on the other hand, the reason people gravitate towards it makes you feel important, doesn't it?
Very.
Yeah.
It makes you feel special. It makes you feel like you matter, right?
Ralph told me that Ralph said this in this group several times, but in one particular instance, he said, the thing I fear the most is whenever I'm standing at the gates going into heaven, that I'm going to see all of the people that I didn't help.
Oh, yeah.
And I was
He
like,
said
bro.
that a couple times.
It's like, bro, please take a breath.
No, it's Ralph's fault.
That's what I need to say. I just need to tell me, yeah, totally.
But I feel like the only way to debate that with a person like that is just to lean into it, just to lean
that's true,
all the way in.
And you were like, I can't wait to see you because you failed me so much. Be on the outside of the gates, like Ralph. It's brutal, man.
And the thing is, I've recently become friends with not homeless, but a recently housed veteran with disability that lives down the street from me. So I've been taking him grocery shopping and having him over to my house for dinner and stuff.
Right.
He used to be the chaplain for an organization, like a motorcycle people.
Yeah.
So he, where he started
in his club?
Yeah.
Like a motorcycle club?
Yeah, like some kind of Hendersonville Christian Bible, biker agency kind of thing.
Oh,
he
okay.
could tell you the name of it.
I know what you're talking about. I've heard of him.
Yeah. Used to be the chaplain for that. And he was telling me a story the other day about how, he was walking into a Hardee's and he saw a guy sitting there, looked down and out. And he said he looked so familiar. He's like, oh, I know that guy. Can't place his face, but I know him. And he said he felt the Holy Spirit be like, why don't you go sit down? He needs somebody. And so he was like, cool, let me go get my biscuit, my coffee, and I'll be right back. Comes back, the guy's gone. He thought, maybe I'll have another opportunity another day. True story. Literally told me this story yesterday. Goes home to his wife, right? Whatever. The next day, he's, coming home from work and she's picking him up for whatever reason. And she's like, did you hear about so-and-so? And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, so-and-so's dad. And his mind immediately remembered the man he'd seen in the Hardy the day before. She's like, yeah, he died yesterday.
Yeah.
And this individual that is now in my circle, he's sobbing. The man's 62 years old. This is 30 years ago. He's still crying because he can't believe that he had felt that urging to go talk to somebody who was hurting and that maybe he was the last. So now there's all this pain involved. Now I'm the last person that maybe could have done. And I'm like, that may be true, but also maybe it's not. Maybe God had 1,000 different individuals in that person's life. Maybe you didn't hear that call. Whatever. That's fine.
Maybe you would have went and done your absolute best and changed nothing.
Maybe nothing would have changed. Yeah, maybe nothing would have changed.
Or maybe you gave them your best and they went and jumped off a bridge because of your words.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Could
that's
make
what,
it worse.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
I can appreciate, I know what it feels like this man that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I was driving home one day and saw him on the side of the road, sweating profusely, standing next to an individual who was clearly high on something.
Yeah. And
that person had his phone and his bank card and was trying to take him to the grocery store using an Uber because he didn't have any other options. Mm. And I pulled over. I mean, normal Tiziana Severse driving down the road, right, world would not stop and put that person in my vehicle. But I saw him and I knew him. I knew him right away.
Yeah.
And I knew he needed my help. and I knew it was going to be okay. And I put him in my car and I took him home and I got him his oxygen and then I helped him get his card and his phone back from that person. Right. But like, and now I feel compelled to be a part of his life, and because he's my neighbor and he's a disabled vet and he can't drive.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I knew him right away. That like, if you talk about the Bible, the good works that God has prepared in advance for you to do, I saw him and I knew him. I knew that's who he was.
Yeah.
And now this person's in my life and it's
And
fine.
if that's not true, you were doing something incredibly dangerous.
If that wasn't true, I was doing something incredibly dangerous.
I think you were doing something incredibly dangerous.
I know, but I knew this man. I'm telling you, I just knew. I didn't put her in my car, but I put him in my car. I knew he was going to be okay. And it has turned out to be okay. And the more that he and I have talked, the more it's become very, very clear that we have like the same belief systems about stuff. Everything's fine. He's a safe person.
Just out of curiosity.
Uh-huh.
Would you define that moment when you saw him and you knew it? Did it feel kind of like a whisper? Kind of like something that was just internal? It just clicked?
Yeah, like it's just a knowing.
I was just curious.
Yeah, just a knowing.
A lot of people that I've talked to that have had those similar experiences, they've defined it as whisper. They defined it as like, I don't want to say it's a word. You know how people take that, especially if you've been in any Christian groups.
It's like I had a hand on my shoulder that was like, hey, it's going to be okay. This is the right thing to do. You need to help this person.
Help him.
Right. So I can appreciate, there's been other times where I've driven down the road and see people on the side of the road and I have not felt that way. And therefore I have not stopped and put that individual in my vehicle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it's okay for it to be your humanity and intuition working together. You don't have to have an outside.
Right. But what I mean to say is my intuition doesn't always tell me when a person is supposed to be, that I'm supposed to help them. And so I can appreciate this individual having a moment where their intuition was telling them to help someone and then they didn't. But the process of then spending X amount of time beating yourself up for years and years and years over it, that I think is one of the conditions that this bite model, that Christianity as a whole has decided to follow, as far as I can tell. That's one of the consequences of it. It's that black or white thinking. It's that you did or you didn't. It's that you are sold out for Christ or you're not.
Did you mean Christianity or did you mean high control Christianity?
I swear I halfway mean actual Christian.
You mean
I
all of
almost
it?
mean all. I almost.
So you think all of it falls short
well,
under the
all
bite
is a
model?
big word. All is a big word.
Yeah.
All is a big word. And I currently go to a church that I don't feel like necessarily follows that. But I think that the structure of Christian church in general, I think it's very difficult.
That.
Oh my God. What?
No, I already did.
Did what?
I chat GPT'd this
What?
earlier. I asked the question, I said, does the bite model represent standard Christianity?
Oh gosh.
I asked that question like 30 minutes ago.
No, shut up. What did it say? What did ChatGPT say?
No.
Oh, good.
The bite model does not represent standard Christianity because mainstream Christianity in its various denominations generally does not exhibit the extreme forms of control outlined in the model. However, some high control religious groups, including certain Christian sects, may display aspects of behavior, information, thought, and emotional control.
Yes.
And then it's written like all of this stuff for you to check.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect. So that makes me feel better. But
I
since
do
ChatGPT
think
said it, it's got to be true.
It's got to be true.
Yeah.
They're never wrong. To be fair, AI also does not believe in a God.
Of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
when we were talking about it in the car on
Yeah.
the way here, though, I don't think it has to be as overt as some of the examples that are
Yes.
given in that wiki that you read about the
Yeah.
bite model. I think that I think it is a bit of human nature and the nature of religion to do a lot of those things. And it's harder to control I mean that not in a negative way, but to manage a group of people without using some
of that stuff.
those tactics.
Agreed.
I think companies do it, churches do it, schools do it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say with the last thing you said. I think you get to a large enough bureaucracy, and
Yeah.
those things appear in some amounts.
Yeah.
They, maybe greater, maybe lesser, but there are absolutely businesses that are run like cults.
Yeah.
Well,
Like
and
legitimate ones that have cult
Dude, it's
culture.
profitable.
But
Yeah.
You don't
profitable,
think Apple is not a
profitable.
cult?
That's
Yeah.
the word. But
It's
see,
not,
that's
but-
the word. And so that's what I'm saying. Is we were driving up here and I was thinking about Max Weber, and he's a German sociologist who was born in the late 1970s. And one of his books that I read in college was about the structure of bureaucracy and how on its own it is a living structure that is designed to do certain things, irrespective of the individuals that are a part of the actual bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
like that's part of what we're talking talking about when I'm saying the model of what church is now, with a pastor, that's their full-time job, and they have deacons, and you have a congregation, and you have a building and a power bill. There's all this stuff involved. It's almost like it's the structure of business, bureaucracy, corporation, whatever you want to call it, that is in itself inherently lended to this kind of control.
Yeah, and I would ask that question
Yeah.
of yourself. I would grab that bite model.
Yeah.
And I would read it. And I would say, does this fit the pattern of what I'm involved in? And if it does, get the hell out of it.
Yeah, get the hell out of it. And then I'm going to do some
support
reading
from
over the
people
next.
that love you.
Well, I'm going to do some reading
know?
over the next couple of weeks, and for our final episode on this particular topic, we're going to actually talk about if you find yourself identifying with this model, how to get out of it. If you love people that you believe have identified with this model, how do you talk to them? And if you yourself are looking for some therapeutic options, what might those options be? Because I'll tell you something right now, like, having a moment where I connected all of these dots as a 43-year-old woman who left those ministries when I was 23, I let go of this guilt that I've been holding on to for 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years, I let go of this guilt that I've been carrying. Like I'm somehow a failure, like not somehow doing enough for the ministry, because I'm not using my voice as a musician, because I'm not using my singing voice to lead people to the Lord.
Yeah, and I talked to you about that in our first episode on Keith Green. I was telling you about, because you had mentioned that you felt like you needed to get back into ministry and that you needed to do more and all that. And I was like, I don't know why you feel all of these things.
Because the church enculturated me to feel that way from the time I was very, very
Right,
young.
you got away from it for 20 years, but that
And
stuff's so ingrained.
It's so ingrained.
It's in you.
That it was all operating in the background. Like you have an app in the background on your phone that's just draining your battery and you had no idea.
Yeah.
I've been having that go in the background. And every time I'm on social media, it's like I crave this social media success.
Mm-hmm.
I crave this podcast success.
Yes.
Not because I want it, but because I'm dying to let go of that guilt that I failed.
You picked the wrong genre.
Absolutely.
You're not going to get there with this. I
Yeah.
can tell you that. I've been doing it for 5 years.
I know, right? although you've got 50,000 subscribers.
Yeah, it's peaked over 65,000.
See, that's
now.
a pretty good platform.
Who gives a rip?
It's not about
I don't
money.
care. It's just more email.
But
and more crap. I don't care about all that.
It's just more bitching.
I like getting together with my friends and talking about hard things and then sharing it with the world and hoping that other people might listen.
And see, what's happened is through this particular study that we've been doing and through the books that I'm going to be reading all weekend when I'm at Andy's house instead of parenting.
That's how she's going to mom so hard. She's ditching the kids.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm hopefully going to tackle a little bit more of those processes. I'm going to read a couple of Stephen Hassan's books and then this other book by a therapist about recovering from religious trauma. I didn't realize that was what was going on, and I'm able to I'm also for Lent. I'm fasting fried foods except for the 3 French fries I ate yesterday, but otherwise I've been doing really good. The fasting from fried foods.
You totally failed, and you're going to burn.
I know, straight to hell. But that and social media. But that's the thing that I realized taking this break from social media, because I've had several TikTok videos go viral. And I've had several TikTok videos that have upwards of 30 to 40,000 likes, including some of the ones that I've made about myself or my Bible studies and things like that. The thing that compels me to want more of that in the absence of it, because I'm fasting from it, I'm realizing how much of that is fueled by this deep feeling of failure that I didn't become a major Christian music recording artist and share the gospel with hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Would never really have figured that out, until I started looking. So we all started looking at this, and then also reading April A. Joy's book, Star Spangled Jesus. Great book.
Yeah. Can I ask Heather a question before you end it? I know you're about to end this.
Well, poor Heather hasn't gotten a word in edgewise.
It's totally fine.
Hey, welcome to Notes from the Other Side.
Hi, glad to be here.
So I have a question for you. So
Sure.
you just heard how Tiziana described a 20-year absence and how this stuff surfaced. It came back up for her.
Yes.
Like feeling like she wasn't doing enough. So you left. Did you experience something similar? Or did you get out? Did you cut it? Or
I feel like it's so much of a worldview when you're raised in the church. It's not possible for it to not come up. All these things come up because it becomes who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you're taught from a a baby, your identity is in Christ. And then like, this is who Christ is. This is what the church is. We are the church. We're going to treat you weird. We're going to, then like, who are you and who are the people around you? I think, of course, it's going to come up forever.
Do you have...
Because it's in there from the beginning.
Yeah.
Have you experienced, and I'm sure I'm probably answering my own question, but have you experienced people that are trying to suck you back into it?
No.
No. Is that because you've stayed away from it?
But I moved.
Oh.
Yeah, here you go.
And the group that I was in fell apart. But as a matter of fact, there was just a bit of like a conflict with, I wouldn't say conflict, Facebook post from a friend that was in the band talking about getting the band back together, doing some more work. And another former member had to say, please don't do that.
Oh.
Please.
Yeah, to
like,
somebody.
Just let that be that and let it be over.
To somebody that was their glory days. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm. But that means enough people have walked away with enough wounds from that experience.
Well, and in a sad way, it also means that like a little bit, those people moved on with their life and like the out of sight, out of mind, like you're fine over there.
Right.
I moved away. You're fine.
Well, I was just saying, the only reason I was thinking about it, because it's just, first of all, it's fascinating to me. I love the human mind. I love how it works. It's so wild, especially mine. I mean, I don't love my mind. It drives me nuts, but it's just like, why is it working this way?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I often wonder about your mind.
I know. I was thinking that. And so I was, when I listen to Tiziana, like she says, I chucked Christianity. She uses those words. I chucked Christianity. And that's when she met Andy and she got into music. She was doing other things, music outside of the church. But then something brought you back in. Someone, whether it was marriage, children, relationships, I don't know, whatever it may be, but something got you thinking. You decided to go back for a degree at this point too. So something happened in your life that made you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, was it your hiking in Spain and seeing the church? Was it just.
No. My marriage fell apart. And in my marriage falling apart, and my band fell apart. And that was realizing now, looking back on it now, because this feeling that I was supposed to do something for God that I didn't, that was really fueling a lot of my, we got to get this next album out. We got to book this show. We've got to do this thing. I mean, Andy remembers because Andy was there. I was the booking agent. I was putting together the stuff. I was doing a lot of that stuff. Yep. I was pushing.
Too.
Yeah, but looking back on it now, that underneath it was this feeling that I had failed God by not becoming a famous Christian recording star.
I have very bad news for you about every motivated person.
Yeah, right?
It's all darkness, baby.
It is, yeah.
It's all darkness.
Yeah, so it
doesn't mean they don't do good things.
Right. Yeah. And Andy and I still collectively, communally grieve the loss of that third album because it was so good.
I was excited about it.
It was so good.
Sure.
We were about to record our third album. We had just got invited to open for this band that had been on Letterman that was going to be at the Lab, right? We had just sent out a whole press kit for our album, our second release, Glass, and to be played on college radios. We'd paid this money. And so we were starting to get traction in some like college towns. There was Glass.
I think that I loved Glass. I think the next one's going to be at least as good.
Oh, yeah. I was on the verge of healing that wound.
Womp womp.
And then I got divorced. And it was like I got plunged right back down into the depths of despair. And on the bottom of the ground, it was just like, at my core, I am a Levite. I just know it. At my core, I'm a Levite. What am I supposed to do with this? And I can remember like drunk as hell, sobbing in the bathtub. I'm a Levite. Mike's husband was like, I don't know what the f you're talking about. Brent was also an atheist, agnostic on a good day.
I'm a Levite.
Yeah. Brent was an atheist / agnostic on a good day, right? And so, I just had to I was trying to figure out who I was anymore. And so one step of that was to like go back to church and see if there was some pieces of myself on the floor near the pews.
And that's what I was curious about with Heather. Did you feel that failure too? Or since you had toured with the band and did all that stuff, you did it. For free, but you did it.
Yeah, I think I found that was not the thing for me.
Yeah.
Right. But I do kind of feel like I actually just started going to a church, the same church that Tiziana's been
I did it.
going to.
I brought her
No,
back.
well,
Pat me on the back, everyone. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
ha 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 ha. But
I just want you to know if it doesn't work, you're going straight to hell.
Tizi's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you're bringing Tizi with you.
Right. My husband used to always say, if you get to heaven and they let you in, please, I would like to be your plus one because I was like the good one.
That's sweet.
But regardless, I think that I need the community, and I'm here for that to some extent. I don't think that I have to buy the literal story to be a part of that community.
I wonder how many people that is true for. I don't know it's necessarily a lot, but it's more than you think.
I'm going
think
to reach
it
out.
should be more
I
than
think
it
it's
is.
probably over 60%.
Do you really think it's that much?
Absolutely. It's super high.
'Cause I've-
Yeah.
When I talk privately, I discover that about people.
Yeah.
That's why I'm trying to mine down to this right now.
Yeah.
We're getting it. We're getting in the gritty, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
I've had that same thought about going to a church many times. I've just never pulled the trigger.
Well,
Yeah.
our church would be the place to go because our pastor will say from the pulpit, we don't really, if you think these stories are literal or if you think they're figurative or if you think they're just a fun fiction, it doesn't really matter to us. Whatever brings you to this community, you're welcome here and we want you here and so does God. Whatever your relationship to scripture is. And we had a guy stand up last week, talked about how being a part of this congregation has healed his identity as a Jewish man and that he was proudly capable of reclaiming his Jewish identity because of his involvement in a Jesus-based Christian church. So our church really, so when it comes to that bite model and what does a Christian church look like that doesn't engage in that, our pastor preaches what she preaches from the pulpit, but then she says, what do you think? And leaves it at that. We had somebody last Sunday say, what if the story of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, what if part of what made his brothers so mad is that it was a dress?
Yeah. You know what? That
You know?
that church that I speak at in Virginia Beach is fundamental as things can be. Andy, I don't know if he knows this, but at the end of every single sermon, he has a Q&A. And he always says, do not just believe what I say. Please study it for yourself.
Right.
I like that.
Now,
Yeah.
a lot of times the
Yeah.
implication is because you'll get to the same conclusion I did.
Right. That's definitely that man's implication.
I'm not so sure. He changes his mind.
No,
That's
he
the
believes
thing.
he's right, like we all do.
But that's the bottom line.
Yeah, but
Black
I'm
or white
right.
thinking, yes or no, in group, out group. If you try to claim that your personal interpretation of the scripture is the correct and inerrant one, that's where you're going to have problems.
Well, that's
And if
why I
your
want to
church
start my own
claims
church.
that-
And it's also, look, just give me the last 4 digits of your social and we'll be started. Just let me know. No, but seriously, like, I think that's why so many churches split. That's why so many start, because everybody has that same idea. My interpretation is right.
Is the
And it
correct
can't,
one.
and
That's
you
pretty
can't, you
human.
can't function that way.
Yeah, but I like what you're talking about. I'm going to come visit your
You
church.
should come visit my
I'm
church.
totally coming.
You should come.
You won't
I'll
go this
talk to
weekend 'cause you're gonna
Ryan
be
and
here,
see if we're ever going to have I'd sent Ryan the one worship song that I ever wrote.
Yeah, you told me about that.
And so maybe one of these days, if Ryan decides we decide to do that one, you guys can all come. But just come anyway. It's a great church.
Well, you visited mine, so I'm going to come visit
I
yours.
did visit yours.
You did.
Yeah.
A deeply fundamental Reformed Baptist church with
Where
the London
Rick-
Confession of
where Rick-
1689.
Yeah, well, Rick preached from the pulpit about audience relevance. I
Oh,
was like,
by the way,
sitting in the back
You know
nail
I don't
biting.
go there anymore, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was excommunicated.
No. Rick,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
When? They gave you the
Which-
certificate
They
of
gave me the boot,
pastorship.
brother. They
Which
gave me
church-
the boot.
Are you talking about that one over there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I thought you
Wait a
kind of
minute.
left
I'm
sort
having
of
like
as
a moment.
soft disagreement about
It was
handling some stuff.
They said, "Are you sure you're going to be happy here?" And I was like, "Well, you told me that I could speak from the heart." And they were like, "We don't want you to do that anymore." I was like, "Oh, nice." Bam.
Because
Wrong
of your
heart.
eschatology.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Oh,
Pretty
man.
wild, man.
But yeah, but we didn't think you'd have different opinions than us.
Well, we thought when you said you were going to talk, we thought we weren't. We thought when we gave you the license to that you wouldn't. It's really weird reverse psychology, and it doesn't work. But anyway, side note, because I don't want to miss because I know you're going to end this episode, and I didn't get what I wanted yet.
Oh,
First of all, that's remarkable that everything that you've said in the previous episode and today,
he's
Heather.
pointing at Heather.
Heather.
For those podcasters that are
don't
listening,
see my hand.
that can't see him wagging his finger across the studio at Heather.
I'm glad that you've decided to go with your friend to listen and be a part of the community. I think it's wonderful, And I was just curious if at any point along your journey that, because you said you were married to someone who did not believe in God. I don't know how he was raised or not, but I can't really get into all that. But are you still open to the idea that something could be possible?
I am open to all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah.
This is a longer conversation than you want to have today.
And maybe we can later on.
But I think that an understanding of the world and people and our place in it is a deeply human thing. And I think it's kind of something that Andy was like touching on earlier. I think that it is like the most human thing to want to find your place.
Yeah.
I don't think that I need it to be supernaturally fixed to find my place. I don't think the things that are in the Bible have to be exceptional to be true, right? I think that there is truth to be found by people as like a result of living on earth
being a
person with a life. So, I mean, I'm open to supernatural things, but I think that there is a real value to our actual
physical lived
life
experience
with the actual people that we're around and independent thought and experience of that.
Yeah. And so your parents,
sure,
you love them deeply.
They go to a tiny little, very left-leaning, but very traditional Presbyterian church.
Right. And they know how you feel and what you think now.
Yeah.
And your relationship is fine.
And yes.
You have exceptional
they're
parents.
Not afraid.
Exceptional parents. That's wonderful.
I absolutely do.
I think that's great.
I do.
I think that's great. I think a lot of strengths that people have can come from a really well-rounded, strong, loving parents. I do. Anyway, not to lessen what you went through. Obviously, you've got your own strength. That's not what I meant.
Yeah, they had their own path to get there too. That is a story for another time. But they're pretty fantastic.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, folks, thanks for listening in to this very charged episode of Notes from the Other Side, where we denounce Christianity, heaven and hell, and everything in between.
Speak for yourself, you heretic.
Says the man who got excommunicated. Oh, man, that's a pot calling the kettle black.
Yes, that's right.
But in any case.
That's the pot calling the kettle heretic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So anyhow, folks, thanks again for tuning in. We're going to do probably one more episode where we wrap up this particular topic. But if you have any thoughts, feelings, questions, or concerns, please feel free to email them to me. My website.
Wow.
nftos.net. That's nftos.net. Notes from the other side.net. You can reach out to me. You can read my blog. You can listen to back episodes of the podcast. And, let me know if you want me to go kick rocks or pound sand or whatever. All right. Thanks for listening in.
Love you,
We'll catch you next time on Notes from the Other Side.
Peace out, guys.
Folks, if you're enjoying this episode, you might really enjoy some of the benefits that come with being a Patreon subscriber. Over at patreon.com, we have different levels of membership, and starting for as low as $2 a month, you'll get access to things like all of the notes that I use to make these episodes, bits of script that didn't make it into the show, and even bibliographies about the books that I read to get where I'm going. Through Patreon, you even have access to some of the video that we take for the show. So some of those interviews that you like so well, you'll get to watch them in real time. So once again, head over to patreon.com/NFTOS, as in Notes from the Other Side. That's patreon.com/NFTOS for more information about becoming a Patreon subscriber to this show. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.